Rosie and I just saw the movie Backrooms, and we wanted to discuss it a little bit, so here we are.
Yes.
So what'd you think of the movie, Rosie? Did you like it?
I did. I really enjoyed it. On a scale from 1 to 10, I would probably give it an 8.5 or a 9.
Did you like it better than Obsession that we saw the week before?
I think that's a hard comparison. Obsession is completely about horror, where this particular movie focuses on a psychological drama.
Yeah, they were totally different movies, both done by Gen Z directors with a new feel and flair to them. Even though they were both horror, they were completely different.
Right. And so, to your point, Backrooms had a little bit of horror, and I think most audiences, that's what they kind of gravitate towards. They want to see a little bit of gore. So that was definitely there. For sure. But I just kind of would classify it as a psychological movie more so than like horror.
Yeah, and it has like even more of a sci-fi aspect to it than Obsession did.
Right.
Which is interesting because you usually like supernatural horror the best, which Obsession was a supernatural horror with magic and spells and stuff like that, versus Backrooms, which was kind of almost sci-fi psychological horror.
Right. But given my background in psychology, I have an appreciation for Backrooms. I think it's a movie that has been misunderstood. We discussed the movie prior, and online, there's just a conflict of opinion. And I think it depends on the person, and I think their understanding of psychology. If they have a good understanding of psychology, then the movie is very easy to follow. If it's someone who's never had any experience in the field of psychology, or that's just not of interest to them, then they probably just thought it was like a waste of time. Like when we snuck in and we saw the ending of the movie, people were leaving the theater saying like, oh, that was a waste of 2 hours. It completely went over their head.
Yeah, so we actually saw Obsession the week before, and once Obsession got out, we actually snuck in and saw the last 5 or 10 minutes of Backrooms, so that's what Rosie's talking about there. And we did notice that when people were coming out, it seemed like a lot of people didn't like it, and even reading the reviews online, where Obsession is basically universally beloved and can kind of fit onto everybody's plate, Backrooms seems to be very polarizing. People either really like it and feel it connects with them, and other people are like, what the heck did I just watch? That was terrible.
Right.
I guess why don't we start off with a very important question. What are the Backrooms? And let me preface this by saying Rosie and I have no history with Backrooms. We are coming at this from a fresh perspective. We don't know anything about the lore. We didn't watch the YouTube videos. We don't know anything about Backrooms, so we came into this movie completely fresh, and we're going to give you our fresh perspective.
I believe the Backrooms replicates our unconscious mind. I feel like the movie definitely focuses on Jungian psychology, and that's what the Backrooms are. Schema boxes within our subconscious mind.
And what's Jungian psychology, and how does it relate here?
So everybody knows the name Freud. He's not the founder of psychology. Of course, William Wundt is the founder, but the psychoanalytic movement was huge, major. And so Jung was kind of like his partner. They were lovers, we know that, but they were also colleagues together. And so Freud basically said that everyone has the unconscious mind, and that was his claim to fame. And then Jungian, trying to identify the gap in the literature, extrapolated on that point and came up with the collective unconscious mind. So they are two psychologists that are well known for developing and promoting the psychoanalytic movement, which is a subfield within the field of psychology. Jung said that we're not just lone wolves here. Like, we are all interconnected. We all have this interconnection through the psyche. And then in the psyche, we have schema boxes, which are basically mental constructs, compartmentalizations of everything that we experience throughout our lifetime. Depending on your spiritual beliefs, it could be this lifetime or multiple lifetimes, but nonetheless, it's housed in the psyche. And of course, psyche is the Greek word for soul. And we know that the Greeks got their information from ancient Kemet. And so the root word for psyche in ancient Kemet would have been the Ka.
So basically, you think that these Backrooms are pockets of our unconscious mind. Well, I guess let me give my take on what I'm thinking the backrooms are after my initial watch. So I actually wrote something similar. I feel like it's a filtering down of a person's subconscious. So one scene in the movie where you look at Mary's old house, she's living in this mess of a house with her agoraphobic mother, and then you watch the camera as it goes down vertically and it goes into the backrooms, and there's different layers. Now, the first layer is a slightly simplified version of that crazy messy house. It's a little bit less messy. There's a little bit less objects, but some objects become bigger. For example, the chair that her mother would always sit in supposedly got bigger and more pronounced in the room because that probably took up a bigger part of her subconscious. And then as you go down another layer, it seemed to filter out even more, and there were even fewer objects in there. And then eventually it filtered down until where it was literally just a bleak room with nothing in it and a door for an escape in the corner. And that is the most basic, broken down version of what she remembered her home as, basically trapped in a room with a little door to escape. And the fact that Clark said that this place remembers people and it remembers them incorrectly each time almost reminds me of these experiments people did with AI when they told AI to do nothing and just recreate this image. When you do it over and over again, eventually the artifacts start to add up and it becomes something completely unrelated to the original image. So it definitely does seem to be a part of our subconscious. Also, the fact that Clark saw what appeared to be a remembrance of his wife in there, and then there's also a version of himself in there as the pirate, and then even Mary has a version of herself as this deformed version of herself left in there that kind of points to an individual's thoughts and feelings being pulled in to the backrooms and helping create the backrooms. Now, what's interesting about this backrooms is that they're only attached to offices and they're only man-made structures. At this point, you don't see backrooms type stuff in a jungle. You're not out there in the forest and then you slip into a tree and now it's a weird version of a forest with different weird animals. No, the backrooms has a very man-made office-like feel to it. And then, of course, there's the monster in there, which maybe represents fear and dark parts of people's psychology and subconscious minds. So, what do you think the backrooms actually physically are? We're assuming it's the representation of a subconscious, but it is a physical place as well.
To me, it represents memory. So that's why they chose to have a furniture store. You know, when we think of furniture, we think of something that's permanent. It isn't transitional. So even if you buy multiple pieces of furniture, that physical piece of furniture is long lasting. At least, good quality furniture is supposed to be sustainable. So the furniture store represents short-term and long-term memory. And that's where these schema boxes, these mental compartmentalizations are held. And so it's a combination of short-term memory and long-term memory. To the layers, to me, that represents the metaverse. So we know through physics that there are parallel realities, possibly parallel universes, and it depends on which timeline you're in. And that's going to pretty much dictate your experience and your memories within that timeline. So either you can have a positive memory on a higher vibrational timeline and have the best results or have the best depiction of that sensory integration, or you can filter down to lower dimensions, lower timelines, and have a lesser quality of an experience. And I think it's our choice. We can go in between different timelines, different dimensions, so on and so forth.
Right. So we kind of came up with our thoughts on what the backrooms are. So why don't we actually ask the internet and see what they're saying the backrooms are? So I'm just going to read you a little bit of what AI says what the backrooms actually are. They are an extra-dimensional labyrinth of endless, non-Euclidean spaces that exist just outside the boundaries of our mainstream reality. Think of reality as a video game, and backrooms are what happens when a player glitches and falls completely through the map. And that's something I actually heard before I saw the movie, that it's kind of like a video game and glitching through the map. And this did remind me of a few video games that I've played, such as Portal, Liminal, Anti-Chamber, and the newer walking simulator called Pools, which feels like it's directly inspired by the Backrooms universe. Because the lore has evolved from a single viral image into sprawling community-driven collaborative fiction, what Backrooms actually are depends slightly on which canon you follow. The core concept is that the foundational rule of the backrooms is how you get there. Borrowed from gaming terminology, no clipping occurs when a person accidentally slips through a glitch in a physical reality, walking through what should be a solid wall, tripping into a floor that suddenly has no collision physics, or exiting a door that leads nowhere. Instead of falling into an empty void, victims land in an alternate dimension of liminal spaces, places associated with transition, emptiness, and an unsettling sense of familiarity completely devoid of normal human life. Another interpretation stems from the original 2019 4chan post that birthed the mythos. The backrooms is a singular, inescapable trap described as nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. In the purest form, it is a psychological prison. It is an infinite, repetitive architectural nightmare where the environment itself, the maddening hum of the lights and the endless yellow wallpaper, is primarily the antagonist. So this definitely differs from the movie in a way, because in the movie you can actually get in and out of the backrooms, as where this description of the backrooms makes me think of the movie Vivarium, where this couple went to find a new house and then they actually got trapped in that reality and couldn't leave that neighborhood no matter what they tried. So that seems to be kind of similar to the original idea of backrooms, that once you're in, you're stuck there forever. And it's basically a glitch in the matrix of which you're permanently trapped. And in the movie, you seem to be able to get out and in. And now let's read another interpretation. This one's called the expanded universe. As the internet expanded the lore, the backrooms transformed from a single set of yellow rooms into an infinite, multi-layered nexus of different environments known as levels. Each level has its own unique architecture, rules, environmental hazards, and entities. The levels are generally structured by number. Level 0 is the tutorial, the classic, endless, yellow-carpeted office space. Level 1, lurking danger. A massive concrete warehouse with flickering lights and exposed pipes, where resources actually begin to appear. Level 2, pipe dreams. A suffocating industrial maze of service tunnels lined with piping carrying boiling hazardous fluids. And then there are also sub-levels and enigmatic levels. The numbering goes into the thousands, featuring everything from infinite abandoned malls and frozen landscapes to surreal, glitchy digital voids. Another interpretation is the cosmic, scientific, and supernatural explanation. Depending on the specific lore hub or timeline you look at, the true structural nature of the backrooms shifts. The sentient dimension. In much of written wiki lore, the backrooms is treated as an ancient, potentially sentient cosmic anomaly. It acts like a predatory ecosystem or a parallel universe that actively harvests things from the real world, aka the front rooms. It copies human architecture, offices, hotels, suburbs, but because it doesn't truly understand human existence, it replicates them in broken, nonsensical, and deeply unsettling ways. Then we come into the Kane Pixels canon, where it's known as the bureaucratic, alt-history sci-fi world. In Kane's world, the backrooms are referred to as the complex. It's given a pseudo-scientific origin story. The lore is as such. In the late 1980s, a fictional research company called Async conducts magnetic distortion experiments to solve world housing and storage shortages. They successfully rip open a portal into another dimension. In this canon, the backrooms is a massive, shifting, organic, yet synthetic void of randomized human architecture that Async attempts to map, exploit, and commercialize, unaware of the horrific reality-bending consequences. A fifth interpretation, the biology of the backrooms, almond water and entities. The backrooms isn't entirely empty. It is governed by strange laws of physics and its own bizarre ecosystem. Entities, the monsters of the backrooms. They range from smilers, glowing grins in absolute darkness, and skin eaters, humanoid creatures that mimic human voices and wear their skin, to the hound, quadrupedal, aggressive beasts with human hair. Almond water, a strange, sweet-tasting substance found throughout various levels. It is the lifeblood of backroom survival, capable of restoring sanity, healing wounds, and keeping the anomalous madness of the environment at bay. Ultimately, the backrooms is a monument to liminality and existential dread. It is the physical manifestation of being lost in that space that feels like it shouldn't exist, built from the familiar scraps of our world, rearranged into an infinite, uncaring maze. What do you think about all that, Rosie?
I personally think it represents quantum mechanics. It's basically a wink at quantum state transmutation. The color yellow to me symbolizes the yellow light that scientists use. So we know like AI machines, they operate on qubits, and yellow light is used to preserve the information that they're getting in their scientific labs. So that's when the scientists were watching and studying. It's representative of that in real time. So everything that's happening in the back rooms in the psyche is being captured and then transferred to AI. So in the movie, they refer to it as MRIs. I don't know if you remember that, but he says we used to use MRI machines until AI. And that's why we are seeing the data centers being created. So like here in Nevada, in Yerington, Nevada, there are 2 AI centers being built in a very small rural town. But why are they doing that? They're doing that to capture what is already in this quantum state of transmutation from our psyche. So that's what I think. I think it's much deeper.
Right. And they said that they used to build MRI machines until they found the backrooms.
And a way into the backrooms is through the psyche. So that's going to be through that quantum state transmutation.
Okay, so for sure we can at least say this. It's a liminal space that's kind of a glitch from reality that people can go into. We'll stick to the lore that is Kane Parsons Backrooms movie, because that's the movie that we watched and that we're discussing here. So we at least know it's a liminal space that seems to take aspects of people's subconscious in there. There are monstrous creatures in there and things that don't make sense. It almost does seem like somebody tried to recreate a human office or human space that didn't quite know what they were doing or didn't have experience in those spaces, kind of like how the movie says. It's like trying to have somebody that's never seen a dog paint a dog only based on a verbal description of a dog. So it's kind of in that uncanny valley where it's close to being normal, but it's not quite normal, so it makes you feel uncomfortable. And it seems like this greedy corporate company found these backrooms. They want to use it for their own profit-driven purposes. And during their research, they don't care about the casualties they have, whether it's one from their own company, other people that might stumble in. They hint towards the fact at the end of the movie that they won't even allow Mary out of the backrooms. So they want to use it for their own corporate greed-related reasons. And we all know how that usually ends up. Let's do a quick character study on Mary. So Mary has a self-help book, but seems miserable herself. What do you think that says about her, Rosie?
I think she wants to project that she's a leading psychiatrist, and she wants the outside world to believe that she's doing well and that she's worked through her own issues. But I believe the scene that shows her doing the transference would say otherwise.
What's the transference for those of us that don't know?
Transference is when you're in a clinical space and you have a patient and they start to project their feelings and emotions onto the therapist. So that's what the leading character was doing. But Clark, he was doing it because his therapist encourages that type of psychotherapeutic intervention.
And what did he specifically do?
He pretended that she was his wife, and she wanted him to open up about his emotions towards his wife. And so in that particular scene, they were role-playing. So he was getting very emotional about it, and he was pretending. But we see in the back room that it almost cost her life. You know, he had her tied down to a chair and started to role-play, and he was becoming more aggressive, and he had a knife in his hand, and he could have easily taken her life or left her in the chair bound while the monster came and ate her. So people should be careful, I think, if they're going to participate in that type of psychotherapeutic treatment intervention. There's other ways to get that information from the patient, but that's what she chose to do.
Yeah, it seems like she hasn't fully recovered from the trauma that having her agoraphobic mother inflicted upon her. You can tell throughout the movie she has flashbacks, and it really affected her in a profound way, where I don't think that she's quite shaken it off. She has lingering depression and anxiety from that experience. Just a quick side note here, when she goes to that house party, I find it really interesting that she walks into a room and there is a Prophet synthesizer sitting there. When I just bought myself a Prophet synthesizer, which you'll be able to see soon on my music channel, Max Ray Music, that really tickled me when I saw my new synthesizer in the movie, which seemed out of place and like it was there for no reason. But through a little bit of research, I think there's something about that Prophet synth showing up in the Backrooms universe, as it's a very well-known and beloved synth.
We know that light and sound go into each other, and in order to go through the quantum state transmutation, it requires light. So if there's light, there is sound. It's called sonoluminescence.
That's cool. We'll have to expand on that at some point. So what do you think about the fact that at the end of the movie, when Mary is running away from Pirate Clark, and then Pirate Clark is trying to get on her. We don't know exactly what Pirate Clark's doing. It looks like he has a sense of longing in him. It almost looks like he wants to connect with people, but he just hurts people no matter what he does, which is actually something Clark said earlier. He said, I don't know why, I just hurt people. And he even hurts himself. He hurts the people he loves. And in this instance, it seemed like he was looking at Mary with a sense of longing, but it was just seconds before he was about to hurt her. And then what do you think about the fact that she actually defended herself and won the fight using her cement hand imprint from when she was a child? And when she went outside and put her hand in the cement, she used that as a weapon. I think that was an interesting choice and probably had a deeper meaning.
I think the giant pirate was like a character that Clark created in his subconscious mind, probably had a lot to do with this image of himself that he associated with working, something that he didn't want to do. There was a fear there. His fear of not being or becoming a successful architect loomed over him. And this particular figure comes in and kills him. And it takes over. It ends his life. And I think that's kind of symbolic of his furniture career ending his architect career. And we know that a lot of us identify by what we do. And so it's a death of his ego. It's a death of him. And so that was coming to consume her. And so she had to go deep inside, and that inner child wounding symbolizes, that's what the hand symbolizes, is that inner childhood wound, and that inner child standing up for herself, saying, I'm going to defend myself from anything that could hurt me on the outside.
Yeah, it's almost like her path to success is to really confront her childhood. Perhaps she's pushed it into her subconscious and not addressed it the way that she needs to, which is causing her depression, anxiety, and her way forward to break out of that is to address it. And that's what this symbolized, her taking a piece of her childhood and fully embracing it and using it as a weapon almost, and as a way forward to defeat the demons around her, aka Giant Pirate Clark. So now that we've discussed Mary a bit, let's take a pivot and discuss Clark. So Clark obviously has some problems. He wants to become an architect. He has a marriage that has not been working out, and they're getting a divorce. Obviously, a big glaring problem is that he's an alcoholic, which is never a good thing. But until he turned in the movie, you kind of thought of him as maybe a bad news bears down on his luck kind of guy who had good intentions. He might have some flaws, he might have some shortcomings, and obviously the alcoholism, but he really kind of flips into a complete evil, crazy person at one point in the movie, and let's kind of hypothesize what happened there. So first of all, he should have definitely warned his employees that there's some sort of monster or some sort of dark entity in the backrooms and that they need to be prepared for that, because he did not prepare them for that at all. And then once the monster took his male employee, and then the female employee went after, trying to save him, he went another route and they got separated. Clark hears the voice of his female employee, who's able to see him, but he can't see her. And he's trying to find her and sets the camera down. And then all of a sudden you see what appears to be this giant pick up this camera and aim it at Clark, and then the scene cuts and we don't know what happens. However, the next time we see Clark, some time has passed, I think weeks, and he all of a sudden is a crazed maniac. So what do we think happened that moment that mysterious creature picked up the camera, and what happened to Clark to make him turn from this down on his luck guy, but meaning to do well, this aspiring architect, into this crazed, maniacal, sadistic person who wants to stay in this backrooms world where he can do sick things to these puppet people and creatures?
I kind of think that he just gave up. He was stuck in the back rooms and he wasn't sure how he got there. And then he just, remember when he called her and he said, I just wanted to let you know I'm in the back rooms pretty much and I'm not coming back. So he had just given in to fate and said, you know what? I can't beat him. I'm going to join him. And I'm going to try to understand this liminal space.
But if he was able to call her, that means he was able to get out, and then he chose to go back in. So it's not like he's trapped there. It seems like a choice.
I vaguely remember a cell phone. Didn't he have a cell phone with him?
No, this is back in 1990, before cell phones.
Okay, well, he called her, and I don't know when the call was actually made. Maybe he called her before he took the kids in there. Those, I guess they were not children, but young adults in there. Definitely selfish ambition. He cared about figuring out the back rooms, at any cost. He certainly wasn't willing to go down that slide and see what was down there. I think he knew that there was danger, but he wasn't going to put himself in the line of fire. So he was willing to sacrifice his coworkers for his own selfish ambition.
Yeah, so let's go back to that moment. What do we think happened in that moment when he was looking for his female employee and the creature came in? I guess we need to decide which creature was that. Was that Pirate Clark that picked up the camera behind him? I'm guessing yes. Or the other option, it could have been that big black giant creature that's kind of just a shadow in the corner that appears much more violent and quick. Maybe that creature that we see in the very beginning of the movie.
I thought it was the pirate, the giant pirate.
I'm guessing it's the pirate too. But what do we think happened in that moment to convert Clark into a hopeless backrooms addict who has given up on real life and just wants to remain in the backrooms?
I think in that moment, he just kind of gave in. He had to figure out a way to pacify the giant. Now remember, this giant is a part of him. So they are interconnected. They have a different understanding. And I think that's probably the reason why the giant reacts to Clark so severely, because he allowed someone into their space. So it was fine when they were coexisting together in that space because they are an extension of each other. But when he allowed himself to intertwine with someone else's psyche, that's when it was an issue, because it presents a threat.
Yeah, I think in that moment he looked and he saw Pirate Clark and he said, wow, this is me. This is like the version of me, almost like the childlike version of myself that represents my inner subconscious and inner being. And he kind of beheld it and connected with it and decided, this is where I'm meant to be. And then, of course, he realized that he had versions of his wife in there and other versions of people that didn't give him any pushback, that let him be the leader and the boss. And he kind of liked that power and control that he had down there, and the fact that he could do these sadistic things without any pushback. They didn't feel pain. He could just eat them. So perhaps once he realized that the Backrooms was a place for him to stay that he really liked, he tried to convince Kat to stay there. And I'm guessing that Pirate Clark must have killed Kat, and that Kat is the female employee, by the way. Clark tried to integrate Kat into their world in Backrooms, but Pirate Clark doesn't like outsiders and ended up killing Kat, and then that's what led Clark to put her head in the refrigerator. What do you think about the fact that Backrooms is very man-made and that it's not outside in the woods? There's no nature really going on besides like random birds flying into fake windows and stuff like that. Like, why is it such a man-made space, an office space?
Again, I'm going to look at it from the psychological point of view. I don't think there's a better representation for memory, for the mind, than a storage area. There wasn't anybody in there buying. So all the furniture that was in that store was just starting to pile up. And that's what we do with our emotions, our thoughts. It just goes into the deep crevices within our psyche.
Yes. So I wonder where this leaves us off going into the future, if and when there's going to be a sequel, which I bet there is, as the movie has done successfully. You know, Hollywood always likes to capitalize on a good movie by making sequels and follow-ups. I wonder what happened to Mary. So does the fact that there was a memory of Mary mean that Mary is dead and now there's a memory of her? Or is she perhaps locked away somewhere else in the Backrooms and this is just another area that's now been opened up by her subconscious? And maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's this endless sprawl of rooms created based on the subconscious of people that have interacted or are close to the Backrooms. And once it touches you in a certain way, part of your subconscious mind can open up another room, another office space with memories of you or things that you had in your life, such as furniture that Clark was obsessed about, or shirts that the male employee wore, like you saw the Stop Apartheid shirt show up. Even though he'd never been in the Backrooms, he was tied to it some way by being in that furniture store. So do you think Mary's dead at this point?
I think Mary is alive. And just kind of going back to Clark when he was seated at the dinner table and he said, you know, these people with different eyes and multiple fingers, this is how they look when people remember them. So I think that's another wink at the collective unconscious mind. So it means that it's symbolic of memory. So at the end, when you see like this deformed version of her, it's actually a collection of memories of her. So at this point, people are thinking of her because she's probably missing. I think she's definitely still living somewhere in that liminal space so that the researchers can continue to study. Because remember the color yellow, they need to get the data from her because now Clark is dead. He was the target that the government was studying and analyzing. And so she's the only other person that is aware of the back rooms. The other three are gone. So I think she's definitely still alive, and she became the new guinea pig.
Right. So yeah, I did like this movie as well, but it's actually conditional. So for me to like a piece of content, a movie, show, whatever it is, it has to have a good ending that makes sense. If this goes nowhere and there's no good explanation for really what the backrooms are and how it all ties together that makes it a good, compelling story, then I will rescind my review and say that I actually don't like it. It really matters where this story goes, how it develops, what things mean, what they actually are. So I hope that it turns into something good. I am intrigued by this first movie, and I will look into the lore a little bit more, but we have yet to see what will come of it, and that will determine greatly if it's something I can recommend to you guys or not. Any final parting thoughts or words, Rosie?
No, I think you summed it up very well.
All right, well, let's see what's in store for us in Backrooms 2. Y'all have a good one.
Bye.